After taking a break last week, Ranger Reject is finally back, and oh my god, boy did it come back with one spectacular episode. There were so many incredible developments, like, I don't know, Pink Ranger is Sakurama's big sister? Or, how about this? Sakurama has been keeping a fighter in his closet for, god, who knows how long? Needless to say, this new arc of Ranger Reject is already shaping out to be one of its finest yet, so let's break down the episode. Later in the video, we will also be discussing a massive interview that came out discussing why some scenes had to be cut in this anime as well, and let me tell you, you don't want to miss that. If you're anything like Sakurama, hiding people in your closet and being the little brother of Pink Keeper is a very tiring life. Well, not with gamer subs.
What did he say?
Use code CTactics and get 10% off your order, which will give me some kickback and support what we do here. This episode of Ranger Reject starts with everyone's favorite, Yumeko Suzuk Kiri, who runs into Pink Keeper and her junior. This was a surprisingly tense scene between the two. They ask Yumeko if she'd like to come with Pink and Green Squadron to an after party where they will badmouth, party together. They even notice that Yumeko is around Sakurama quite a bit, so they would even allow her to take him as a +1. Which, seeing as this is Negi Haruba, this is about the closest thing we'll get to one of those cliche rom-com scenes where the main female lead yells back, "We're not dating, Baka!" Yumeko just makes up some excuse, but Pink Keeper has a few words to say, and it'll be the first of many words, as she surprisingly got a lot of focus in this episode. But the two women cross paths, and Yumeko slights her by saying that all she wanted was for Sakurama to come, which Yumeko rightfully calls out as strange, because as we've learned pretty quickly, she's strange. Instead, Pink Keeper reminds Yumeko to keep focusing on being amiable to climb up the ranks. And I like this line because it's a blink and you'll miss it kind of line, but she's saying to be amiable as personal advice. That's because she most likely had to be amiable to get to the position where she is in. So Yumeko does as she is told, but under her breath finds all of this stuff boring, and I get the sense that Yumeko isn't the kind of person to hide her love away, so to speak. She finds putting up airs to be annoying and tiring. In other words, she can't be her authentic self, which is, I guess, slicing heads. So if she's not doing that, then what's the point? This adds an extra layer to her character overall, as you'd probably guess. As D is on the plane back to the facility with Bro Benny, Sakurama is washing away his face in the stream, and this may be the last time we see our Sakurama proper, so savor the image well. Though D mentions the power of bonds, which I think is a great way to start this new arc, because that's exactly what D goes through in this episode, kind of. He meets a ton of new people with whom he'll need to form bonds to make it through. In Sakurama's room, his laptop is blowing up with notifications. Turns out he's still recovering from the stomach injury, so he spent the day in his room to rest. But he has this feeling inside of him, which goes back to when Sakurama told him in the cave that when his parents were killed, he and his big sister were saved by Blue Keeper and were then raised by him. This inspired him to join the Rangers in the first place. And this goes much deeper, as one would expect, as Sakurama intended to expose the Rangers prior through the media. But instead, the media turned on him and tried to kill him. Even so, he is prepared to abandon everything yet, even though he doesn't want to cause trouble for his older sister to expose the Rangers or even her, though I gotta say, maybe you should. However, things go even deeper when D remembers a time when, I believe, one of their bosses told them all that they should end this war by taking back Earths. And I gotta say, taking back? That's an interesting way to phrase that, as this implies the fighters have some sort of ownership over Earth previously, which, was not what they told us in episode 1, right? So he goes on to say that this is the only way that he knows to live, which implies that he's lived his entire life like this, leading to him being tunnel visioned on vengeance and taking back their freedom. It's really consumed his entire person pretty much, and when asked by Sakurama what he'll do with his freedom, he acts as if it's obvious, but doesn't quite give an answer. My thought is that he doesn't doesn't know because he's only lived life with this one goal in mind, which can be dangerous as without something to live for, he could just continue carrying on that hatred and create a cycle out of it. But his computer still going off, and when his closet makes even more noise, he drops the computer, breaking it somehow. Probably something he should have done as soon as he entered on hindsight, but seriously, that is one flimsy computer. But this computer is important as it has all of the information Sakurama has left D to help him infiltrate the Rangers. So he takes it to get repaired, and in turn is sent to hand out ID cards to other independent Rangers, which introduces us to a bunch of new Rangers. He first runs into Yamato, who has aspirations of being the next Red Keeper, who he's holding a grudge against. Now granted, Yamato really only wants all of the Ranger ladies to fawn over him, though from the looks of who is in the Independents, I think he should count his lucky stars. We are introduced to a slew of new independent Rangers: Angelica Yukino, a girl with pink hair who doesn't like to be bothered and wants to be alone; Rinrin Akabayashi, who is absorbed with appearances; and to round out the women, Angel Usukubo, an interesting looking woman with heterochromia eyes, or maybe a blind eye with 2 green hairpins. She seems pretty plain, just wanting to get along with everyone in terms of personality. Overall, Negi Haraba's impeccable character design and sensibilities are second to none, so praise be to our Lord and Savior, Haraba-san. Rinrin and Angel bring up how Sakurama is the only one to defeat a monster in the Independents, but since D doesn't know anything about that, he sort of fumbles through, which kind of confuses the two of them. Next up is the male group of Independents, the first being Sojiro Ishikawa, who has aged a little bit since the ID photo was taken of him. Then there is Tsukasa Shippo, who is all about working out muscles with this cool pink and light pink hair combo. Next we have Kai Shion, who is, oh my god, sure to drive every single lady mad. White hair, bad attitude, piercing gaze, yeah, this is sure to fill that angry Bakugo character type right up. Rinrin even warns him that it's dangerous to be around that guy. And finally, we have Eigen Urabe and Ranmaru Koguma, who are both a couple of basket cases, as you probably would guess. Feeling that D now is able to understand Sakurama a little better, we get this walking shot of Sakurama where you just know every person in that studio knew exactly what they were doing there. We are then finally properly introduced to Sesura Sakurama, Hibiki's older sister, Pink Keeper, and she is mightily fine. A mightily fine case of crazy. Speaking of crazy, Sakurama is hiding a female fighter in his closet. What do you expect? Some deep analysis and explanation of that? I'm not going to give it to you. It seems though as if Hibiki going on and on about trying to learn to talk to the fighters/monsters goes so deep with him, he's keeping one in his closet in a ranger facility. That's smart. Hibiki may not be as crazy as how Sesura is crazy, but his crazy is honestly kind of built different. Much like how D made an exception to not kill the maintenance guy and a couple others, it seems that the female fighter here has a very similar mindset to most fighters in that they do develop a sort of soft spot for some people and act like just a massive tsundere. Also, wow, these two, honestly, they're so similar. They're both numbskulls who don't understand they will very easily be killed by pretty much anyone, even the janitors. Hell, I could probably kill them. So Hibiki does what any upstanding male anime character would do, kabadons her into submission, and she loves it. She loves it so much, she decided to spill the beans to who she thinks is Sakurama that she is in reality a fighter. Granted, we know Hibiki probably knew this. I mean, he's a very good boy, but there is some crazy alternate version of this scene where Hibiki is just kidnapping women with glowing eyeballs and throwing them in the closet for whatever reason he thinks. Maybe he just likes hearing the sound of banging on his closet. Who knows? Seriously though, this one is crazy too. I'm starting to think Hibiki is just crazy just for the amount of crazy he puts up with. He's like working with D, who is most crazy. His sister, well, Jesus Christ, the less said about that. And now is this female fighter? Jesus, who is next? Hibiki has a second closet where he keeps Nino and Ichika Nakano for girl talks on the weekend. So D does the right thing, revealing his true identity to the female fighter. She brings up how she thought there weren't many of their kind left on the surface, and that help has finally arrived, which perks D's attention. It's an interesting thought, but with the revelation of the closet girl, it makes you wonder how many fighters are out there under disguise. D is under the guise that there isn't anyone left besides those in the Sky Fortress. But what if there are offshoots or those who escaped? And are either disguised like D or hiding in closets like Bochi the dork here? And a dork she is, as she thinks that they can just take out the Rangers one by one. But D tells her that this isn't the right time, and she follows his directive because after all, she's a sub. So AMC's Creep on Wheels makes her way into Hibiki's room, and the scene, for the most part, is quite normal for Sesura, at least. I think that's mostly because this entire scene is mostly focused on D trying to draw the attention away from the banging in the closet. Sesura brings by a bag of apples for Hibiki as she knows he likes him, and oh my god, this bag of apples packed so much Neon Genesis Evangelion symbolism. While she goes outside, Closet Gremlin comes out waiting for the signal to attack. Her special ability seems to be not listening. She tells him being patient isn't in her character, which I could have told you that myself. Sesura comes back in with Kobeni's knife and cuts an apple in the most forceful and gratuitous way someone possibly could. It almost looks as if she were struggling to cut through it. And according to her, their mother used to peel them for Hibiki just like that, proclaiming she can do something this simple, which turns out to be a lie, as she struggles to slice through it, and when she gets there, she launches the blade into the closet door. How do you do that? How? It's pretty clear to me that this scene is trying to get across that Sesura is trying her best to feel in a role for Hibiki's mother, rather than his big sister, or maybe all of the above. So she goes to all of these troubles to make sure that Hibiki is taken care of in a motherly way, but she has zero motherly grace, or she's not a mother. She's just not. Or a mother of her son, who is actually her brother. So confusing. There is a hint of sadness, though, that comes with that as well, because Sesura, despite her creepiness, seems to have been broken either by her parents' death or probably by becoming a ranger. At least that did her in. As well, when she was a kid, she tried to make sure that she was a good role model for Hibiki growing up. She didn't want him to turn out like their parents, as she knew the truth, while Hibiki loved them too much to see what was before his eyes. So it seems that combined with the trauma of their parents and their parent dying, and whatever else she's gone through since then, it's broken her, while for Hibiki, it sort of paid off in him pursuing a more righteous path. But it's funny to think, but maybe Sesura's sacrifices in life put Hibiki on the right track. Besides the closet people. Also, we get our first dose of creepiness from Sesura as it's revealed all of those pings from Hibiki's computer were indeed from Big Sis here. She even says she made the right choice coming here to meet him, which why does she got to cut the apple with that? That's so creepy. This is when I realized, the bruised apples are a representation of Sesura's character. She's damaged and bruised, and while still a delicious looking red apple, you turn that sucker over, she's got a blemish, and they're kind of beyond ignorable. It makes me think that maybe Hibiki has been ignoring his sister for this very reason. If she is this madly obsessed with her little brother, well, if that were I, as well, I would want to cut ties with her. That being said, we don't know if that's the case, but if so, it would make sense. Even for Hibiki, as her obsession has passed a point where it's not just unhealthy, it's a complex. Though, she still cares for him genuinely, of course. She tells Hibiki he should leave the Rangers, as being a pacifist like him will get him nowhere. Very supportive, big sis. Very supportive you are. Echoing the sentiment she gave Yumiko about being amiable in this scene a lot. So leaving once more to check on her phone, Closet Girl breaks the door and proceeds to grill D, but when he reveals he isn't from the surface, she attacks him. Turns out that the surface fighters see those in the Sky Fortress as cowards who sold out to the Keepers, which is entirely fair and not unreasonable at all. Granted, D and her attitudes more line up, and even think about it, D doesn't agree with many of those in the Sky Fortress, but the fact that she sees them as that adds more depth to the fighter cause and lore. Not everyone agreed with how the war ended, so D, learning from best girl Yumiko, chops her head off and puts her in a case. Also, it turns out that Sesura has as much awareness as Twilight in Spy Family, because that door might as well be her assassin wife. She's so infatuated with her brother, she can't even be suspicious of him. That's how crazy she is. She suggests that they live together like they used to after she retires, because she wants to protect him and not feel scared anymore, which is a very peculiar line from Sesora. The fact that someone like Sesora is scared as a dragon keeper makes no sense. That is until later, of course, but she holds up a knife against Hibiki. I'm starting to sense that this is someone's strange fetish. Incest sister, who is paraplegic, crazy, big sister archetype, motherly but with zero grace, and a yandere? This one is for the streets and for the loony bin. She even says she'll do everything for Hibiki. Listen, I hate to quote Star Wars here, I apologize, but sis only deal in absolutes, people. She tells him that the Rangers aren't as righteous as he thinks they are, which also shows another disconnect between the two. Hibiki very clearly knew the Rangers weren't good people or an organization, so why doesn't she know he knows that? Well, Hibiki would do anything to not trouble his big sister or get her into trouble, so maybe that is why. Hibiki is trying to protect Sesora just like how Sesora tries to protect him. She even tells him that saving the world would require a different path than the one she has chosen for herself. This is another blink and you'll miss it kind of moment, but Sesora notices that when Hibiki tells her that she doesn't want to run anymore, her blade actually cuts into him, and very clearly she notices that particles are coming from the cut. I don't know how you couldn't. So he takes the knife from Sesora and stabs the bruised apple, telling her he came to fight, which also causes Closet Goblin to perk up as well. Sesora then says, even if it means fighting me in the end? Well, we do not get his answer. Instead, it cuts to Sesora in a car with her junior as he asks what the reunion was like. D, now able to breathe, tells the lone closet dweller that he regrets letting them fight for them, that they've been slaves, and that they'll fight back to win their dignity. She doesn't intend on forgiving him, we'll see about that, young lady, this is an anime, and says to do whatever he wants, but to tell her one thing, is Hibiki still alive? And of course, he says Hibiki wouldn't die so easily, because he probably wouldn't, which causes her to smile, showing there is some sort of connection between Hibiki and Closet Girl. Sesora then stops in front of a park to save a woman being harassed by a bunch of straight up dummies and deals with them, but now it's time to reveal Sesora's true colors. She pretty much gets turned on by her brother's rebellious look in her eyes after what he said to her. Her junior says, and I quote, "I guess even girls are just as likely to surprise you as boys do," as she moans out Hibiki's name to the moon. Good God, I've said this in the last video, but I've read probably up to about the halfway or slightly past this arc. I forgot about this in the manga, and honestly, it's no wonder why I forgot about it. I feel like Sesora gives nearly every character a run for their money in terms of craziness, but let's be real, when it comes to incest, Mei has that shit on lock. At least she actually had sex with her brother, I guess. Joking and disgust aside, this is yet another example of how being a dragon keeper is actually inherently a corrupting job that changes you down to your very core. The child that Sesora was all of those years ago is nothing like how she is now. Before that, she seemed as if she were trying to protect herself and protect her brother and make it out in one piece. But now, as an adult and a dragon keeper, she's falling to the low lows of her love for her brother being corrupted into this amalgamation of her being the big sister, but also taking on aspects of their mother and some of her father to try and fill the void in Hibiki's life. But what she's doing is trying to fill her void of not ever having a proper family. This is manifesting outwardly as an overbearing, motherly, ungraceful, but stern paternal figure that has slowly become an obsession to the point of sexual desire for her own brother. She's weird. She's a creep, but it's yet another example of how corrupt and utterly devoid of humanity the Dragon Keepers are. Even something as simple as familial love between sister and brother in this organization, well, you've seen what it's been turned into. Sesora is also crazy because she tries to tell Hibiki to quit so they can retire and live together like a happy family, yet at the same time she wants to do everything for him, and on top of that threatens him when he doesn't back down, which in turn, well, turns her on. She's a mess on the inside, having several conflicting roles inside of her head going on simultaneously. She's a sister, she's a mother, she's a father, she's a dragon keeper. She is Hibiki's enemy, yet his closest ally, and wants to sex him up. Sesora is the manifestation of how the dragon keepers corrupt love and perverse it into something unrecognizable. She is tainted. She's a bruised apple, and the only way to move forward is to take the knife of justice and pierce the skin and destroy the rotten core. With that being said, before we get into the big interview about cut content and comments from the last video, real quick, if you kindly could drop a like and subscribe, it would be a tremendous help. Thank you, I appreciate you. Now let's get into this big interview with Ranger Rejects director, discussing the decisions behind their choice to cut content from this adaptation. This news comes via Nick Valdez at comicbook.com. The headline reads, "Go-Go Loser Ranger director addresses cutting scenes from the manga." For posterity, in the last video, we addressed some concerns that episode 4 had by cutting a fairly large swath of content, but even with the first 3 episodes had done so as well, but not to that degree. This caused many to worry, but especially me, who got worried we were about to be handed another Promised Neverland Season 2. Thankfully, Ranger Rejects director Keiichi Sato was asked in an interview with February why some material didn't make the cut. Quote, "It was necessary to remove various elements, extract the interesting parts, improve the story, and increase the sense of speed while keeping in touch with Haraba for this next version of the franchise." He goes on to say, "The story begins to take a big turn when the main character, Fighter D, infiltrates the Ranger Corps in order to defeat Red Keeper, but the original story has a slightly different flow up to that point. It felt slow," Sato began. "However, that sense of tempo is necessary in order to develop the story while helping the reader understand the unique worldview and setting, and it is natural that it takes time to build the foundation. But while the slower pace was fine for manga readers, it's not necessarily as captivating for an anime." He continues, "However, since anime is short, lasting just over 20 minutes each week, the most important thing is how much the story can be driven to attract viewers," Sato explained. "Therefore, it was necessary to remove various elements, extract the interesting parts, improve the story, and increase the sense of speed. We had many discussions with the original author, Negi Haraba, about arranging the story, and we proceeded with the project while gaining his understanding." So to break it down further, some elements of the manga don't translate well over to a weekly anime that only has a time budget of say 20 minutes. So these cuts weren't to rush the story like in Promised Neverland Season 2. These cuts at the heart of it were to enhance the anime watching experience overall. So instead of rushing, Sato decided it was in their best interest to cut out scenes and elements that didn't make sense in an anime medium. This makes sense as going over the cutscenes myself, a lot of the cut content was simply just funny gags, extra pieces of dialogue, or transitional lines that aren't really consequential. Would it be cool to see them? Yeah, of course. But as an example, I can see why they'd cut a scene when D is fighting Bro Benny in the forest and he turns into a Japanese schoolgirl as a funny gag. So the good news is we're not getting a rushed adaptation, we're actually getting a more focused adaptation. Outside of that, I asked in yesterday's community tab post what you guys thought about Sesara Sakurama, and oh boy did I get some hilarious responses. So Pink Ranger is that self-sacrificing dude's sister, and she's like every other sister in anime? Yeah, crazy twist, right? As I said, I didn't remember she was his sister until I saw this and went, wait, no way, really? I think the whole incest thing is just something, honestly, I try to force out of my mind in anime because it's usually played up as a really creepy thing and uncomfortable, or a fetish, which is exactly how it was portrayed in this episode. Well, outside of it being a popular Japanese fetish and having Hermione Hibiki's name like crazy. Brocon anime trope while throwing in a little yandere. I must admit, Negi Haraba was smart by throwing in a little bit of yandere in there because, you know, there are people out there who will eat this stuff up like it were carbohydrates at a McDonald's. I gotta ask, I know some of you here watching this, come on, y'all. I know you're into it. I demand you reveal yourself in the comments so that we can shame you, which I know you probably like too if you're into Sesara, so we're gonna mega shame you. Let's go! Wincest on top. Speaking of shame, she looks a lot different from the manga. And yeah, she does look a lot different in the manga. In the anime, they gave her kind of a more milfy kind of look to her, which I think they did so they could show more of her motherly traits. Notice she has the dead mom haircut too. Incest jokes aside, Sesara is interesting because the Rangers turned her genuine love for her brother into, well, you know what they turned it into. So with the design though, they kind of nailed that aspect of her character perfectly though, and I love the change. The last scene showed us that she really loves her brother. Yeah, so I gotta ask you guys, the main event of WrestleMania, it's Sesara, Mei, Momoko, who else is in that match? Also, who's winning? And why is Sanji the special guest referee? Thank you, everyone, for watching the video. If you made it this far, this video script is 9 pages long. So please, if you can drop a like, subscribe, and comment below your thoughts on Ranger Reject Episode 5. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. Bye-bye.